Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of RegTech Live event. I am Vandana Kothari, Senior Manager in FinTech Supervision Team of DFSA, and I will be responsible for steering you through today's program. After some interesting discussions on eKYC and digital onboarding yesterday, today's agenda will focus on overall landscape of regulatory compliance and explore some of the other regulatory technology solutions. Today's program, as you will be able to see on your screen, will run for 2.5 hours. We will start with our keynote speaker exploring current trends in regulatory compliance, followed by a panel discussion on navigating the RegTech landscape. Post that, we will have demonstrations from 4 different RegTech solution providers, and then towards the end, we will hear on some of the DFSA regulatory policy initiatives, followed by short closing remarks. If you have questions or comments as we go along, please feel free to type them in the question box. If you're on a laptop, it will be on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you have logged in from a mobile device, it will be in the tray at the bottom of your screen. With over 600 people registered for this event, we might not be able to get to everyone's question, but we will try our best to answer as many as we can. After the event, we will have few survey questions that we request you to respond to. The questions are pertaining to today's event and to your institution's interest in RegTech solutions. Answers to those questions will help us understand your preferences and drive this event accordingly in the future. Not taking any more of your time, I would like to kick off today's event by inviting our keynote speaker, Munir Khan. Munir is a partner at Simmons & Simmons and heads their financial markets, financial services regulatory, and international Islamic finance practice. During his career with Simmons & Simmons, Munir has helped in developing a number of RegTech products for his clients, including in the areas of cross-border regulatory compliance and financial crime compliance. Over to you, Munir. Munir, you are on mute, so if you can kindly unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone, wherever you're dialing in from. Today's presentation from myself is going to be on current trends and challenges in regulatory compliance. And really the purpose of my session, which is very short, is just to lay the land, provide the lay of the land, provide some context for the, I'm sure, much more interesting discussions that will take place later today, including demonstrations of some of the very interesting and exciting new regulatory technology solutions that are coming to the fore. I think it's safe to say that when I first started to discuss this conference, as it was then, with our friends at the DFSA and the DIFC authority, it was a very different landscape. Nobody knew at that time really what was about to happen, and as a result, a lot of what I would have ordinarily talked about, I'm not going to focus on so much today. I think that also reflects what's been happening around the world in terms of priorities. And you'll probably hear that word quite a lot in my presentation and also later today. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. Vandana, can you just confirm that you can see my screen, please?
Yes, I can, Munir.
Okay. So I think just to start with, it's very difficult sometimes to define some of the terms that we hear day to day, such as RegTech, FinTech, etc. But as lawyers, we always like to try and define everything. So here goes. In our own sort of research and in terms of our own client base, we've identified certain key market segments. And this is just a kind of graphical representation of those segments. this doesn't necessarily mean that the level of development in these individual RegTech market segments is at the same level. And one of the things that you will see, and I'm sure you'll pick up on as you look into this market, is that there are some areas where obviously the need of the day is greater, and I'm going to focus on some of those areas such as KYC, AML. But I just wanted to put up there that this is a broad area, it's a developing area. We also have subtech as well, so supervisors and regulators using technology to assist themselves in their supervision of the market, which is actually developing into a larger subset of the RegTech space. So I wanted to just at a very high level set out some of the key challenges, and obviously what we're looking for is how technology can assist in meeting some of these challenges and tackling some of these difficult and often intractable challenges. As I mentioned earlier, with COVID, a lot has changed. Regulators, we've been tracking regulatory developments as we do, but at a much more sort of daily pace since the start of the current health crisis. We've launched our own tracker, global regulatory tracker, just to keep on top of all of the new developments, the announcements, the measures, the delays, etc. And it is overwhelming. So one of the areas which I think will definitely develop as a result of this crisis is dynamic compliance. To be able to just monitor all of the change, the increasing pace of change, and stay on top of what that means for your business is hugely important. Cybersecurity, there was obviously an increasing flow of information and regulation in this area before the current crisis. But we've seen, I think one of the largest areas of regulatory announcement since the start of the crisis has been around fraud and malicious activities online, and security and cybersecurity as a result. This will only act as a catalyst for increased focus from financial institutions as well as other players in the market on their digital transformation strategies. And we're seeing an increased use, and we were even before the crisis, of technologies such as multi-factor authentication and the use of AI to protect from cyber attacks. I mentioned AI. I think there has been a lot of discussion about the ethics surrounding AI, and I think that will only increase. We're seeing regulators coming out with their own position papers on the subject, and I'll touch upon that a little later in this presentation. Cryptocurrency is a big concern, and I think even here in the region, regulators have started coming out over the last few years with their own announcements and positions on this area, and that is only going to accelerate as a result of what's happened. I think various lockdown measures around the world, crises in terms of issues such as remittances, just the ease of moving money around the world has made it more evident to everyone that this is not an area that will become less important. If anything, the world's move towards digitalization is accelerating at a greater pace now, and crypto and the regulation of crypto and finding the right balance between permissiveness, restrictiveness, allowing innovation to happen in a safe environment will be a key challenge and continue to be so. Last but not least, and by no means are these challenges exclusive. There are many others, but I've picked out some of the key ones from our perspective. Is privacy. We've seen key pieces of legislation and regulation come out around the world. The GDPR in Europe, CCPA in the US and California, and even in the DIFC very recently, the announcement of a new data protection law, which will come into force on the 1st of July with a 3-month grace period. This is incredibly important. One of the things that we've seen as a result of the current health crisis is new groups of people, new individuals who are coming into the market, the digital environment, if you want to coin it, give it a term, people who are vulnerable, people who are not as digitally savvy. These people, consumers need protection, and I have no doubt that we will see an increase and a proliferation of privacy data relating legislation and regulation. So what are some of the key themes that we're seeing as a result of the response to COVID, and how has that changed from before? Clearly there were, and we're seeing this, we're tracking regulatory announcements, statements, issuance of new rules and regulations and forbearance measures around the world. As I mentioned before, we have our own tracker, which many of our clients are using, especially the large financial institutions. And we are seeing patterns emerging from that. There has definitely been a reprioritization. We will see delays in some of the regulation that we were anticipating. Sadly, there are some areas which, very important areas that I think will inevitably move down the list. And by the way, this list that I have up is not in order of importance at all. But naturally, there are short-term issues that have been highlighted. Operational resilience, obviously a key issue. Large parts of the world's economy are working online. They are having to become kicking and screaming in some cases, digitally savvy. We're seeing a huge difference, even in our own client base and also in our own industry, the legal services sector, a massive difference between who is able to cope in this environment and who is finding it difficult to do so. We have businesses, thankfully, such as our own, who were on the cloud and in many ways were digitally native. But other businesses will struggle, and this whole issue about operational resilience is front and center of mind. But we've seen a number of announcements in this area, including locally here in the UAE. Market conduct and abuse and the whole issue of cybersecurity and being able to monitor systems and institutions effectively, again, extremely important. I think we're seeing a number of announcements in this area. The issue here is that increasingly with very large financial institutions having moved to remote working, in many cases trading taking place from home, it is becoming more and more difficult for institutions to monitor conduct and monitor effectively potential abuse. This kind of brings us into a theme that was already developing before the crisis, culture, governance, and accountability. And we're seeing a number of pieces of regulation and legislation coming in, trying to tackle what is often a very difficult area to pin down. and legislate and regulate for. We're seeing regulation applying to senior managers, for example, in the SMCR regime in Europe, and I'm sure that we will be seeing similar developments in this part of the world. Financial crime is a huge topic. For anyone based in the UAE, you will know that the UAE went through a mutual evaluation process with the FATF last year, and a report was recently issued by the FATF. And there have been some very interesting legislative and regulatory developments over the last year or so in the UAE. And this will not stop. We know that over the next year, in particular in the UAE, which includes the financial free zones, such as the DFSA, as this is a federal issue, we will see further developments in this space. One of the issues that has come to the fore in this area has been in what is a relatively multi-jurisdictional jurisdiction, the UAE, where you have financial free zones, you have a federal legal regime, and you have general commercial free trade zones. That kind of connectivity of systems and information between them is very important, and I think RegTech will have an important role to play in finding a solution to quite a complex network of systems. We've heard a lot, and I'm sure we will hear a lot about eKYC and how that can play a part. The other area, which I think we will definitely hear more about this year and going forward, is KYS, Know Your Supplier. So in addition to knowing your clients, knowing your suppliers has come into sharp focus. There have been some very public sort of scandals and incidents of fraud in supply, in particular of medical equipment. So this is another area where RegTech can definitely play a part. I mentioned ethics in AI. There's a lot of thought going into AI, how it can be used responsibly, how to prevent AI introducing undue bias, discrimination, and I fully expect more regulation in this area. We ourselves are looking at this very closely with our clients. Our sectors of focus are FI, asset management, technology, and life sciences. So we're really in the thick of things here. And we expect a lot of further development and thought in this area and statements from regulators. There are other areas which I think are incredibly important. Regulators, and we've seen the FCA issue their own business plan for 2020, are trying to bring the focus back on outcomes for the customer. Not a pure tick box rule-based approach, but a principles-based approach, and this should lead to better outcomes for customers, and that's very important, that we're not missing the bigger picture in terms of what the desired objective is. And then finally, regulators themselves. So I think there is an increasing acknowledgement amongst, I would say, the leading regulators that they themselves need to transform how they work. They need to become quicker. The complexity, the scale of the matters and the institutions that they are regulating is growing. With the current challenge of digitalization, this is not going to get easier. They need the tools to be able to help them and assist them in supervising, and this is a huge opportunity for the industry to develop technology which can also assist regulators. Just very quickly before I finish, we're not just advisors on law and regulation, but we also have developed our own products and solutions in this space. There are many, and too many to list, but this is something that we've been involved in for many years. I was recently involved in launching a new product, Investor Insights. This is interesting for the Middle East because one of the key risks here, regulatory risks, is cross-border compliance. We have a patchwork of legal and regulatory systems in the Middle East. And it's very difficult for financial institutions, asset managers, and others to keep on top of all of the developments, the nuances, the guidance, the unwritten rules, especially where the systems are not as developed and as detailed as in other parts of the world. So I think there is a huge requirement for regulatory technology, supervisory technology in this part of the world. And I think this is a huge opportunity for the industry. I am conscious of time. I think my 20 minutes or so is up. What I would say is, if anyone does have any questions, I am very happy to take those now. Or if there are any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. My contact details are on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Munir, for your insightful views on some of the trends and challenges that industry is grappling with and in the regulatory compliance space while they try to go digital. To further explore some of the nuances around RegTech implementation, let us move to the panel discussion on navigating the RegTech landscape, which will be moderated by Bhavin Shah. Bhavin is a partner with Roland Berger and heads their Middle East banking practice. Bhavin has been in the region as a senior management consulting professional for over 12 years and has recently been named among the latest batch of young global leaders by the World Economic Forum. I will let Bhavin take over from here and introduce our panel members and lead the discussion. Bhavin, Nigel, Charles, and Sanjoy, if you can just come live.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. And Vandana, thank you for introducing me. And Munir, it was very, very insightful. Thank you so much for that discussion as well. We have a very interesting topic today and a very short time. We're going to talk about navigating the RegTech landscape. And I'm going to start a bit with what RegTech is about, what are the various trends that we see in the market, and then we have our esteemed panelists who are going to talk about various topics, and we're going to make it more and more insightful as we go along. So while we go through the introductions, let's start with mine. So I manage Roland Berger's Middle East banking practice. I typically advise fintechs, regtechs, and startup companies, as well as banks and investment companies who are looking into regtech and fintech space. So what do we see in the regtech space right now? Right? If you look around the regtech space, then I would put it this way. In last few years, there are certain trends which emerge very well. For a longest time, RegTech was the next big thing to be happening, and fintech was already there. What has happened in last 1 year is we all now know RegTech has happened. It is not the thing of future. It's a reality of today. It's here, it's now, and it's going to stay. It's no more a thing of the future. RegTech is one area which has perhaps starved for the VC capital the most among all the innovations that we have seen in the market. So until about last year, it is estimated as around 25 billion was invested in RegTech VC space. However, it's expected to grow 5 times in next 5 years to approximately 125, hopefully by 2025. In the same case, what has also happened in the RegTech space is there were a lot of big ideas. Some RegTech worked, some did not work. For some RegTechs, there was a market demand, for the other, it was not. And it has nothing to do with the company. It has more to do with the concept that the companies brought to the table, to the market, to the ecosystem, and the market's readiness to accept it or not. A lot of big words came in. We had blockchain, we had AI, we had data lakes and data galaxies. Some of these worked, others did not. So that also got very clear. The third trend that I saw in the market was that for the first time in last 1 year, you see regulators across the world finally acknowledge the presence of RegTech and its importance. So we now have regulators asking financial institutions, how are you leveraging RegTech, which was not the case before. We also see another trend, which is obviously around the mounting regulatory pressure, whether it is for the financial stability, financial inclusion, or financial security. In all the three spaces, there is a mounting pressure to make the financial sector much more stable and confident, and hence the pressure on regulatory technology side to deliver efficiency, speed, agility, and providing some form of analytics as well. The other trend that we also saw with RegTech was it's now a global phenomenon. It's not restricted to just London, just in New York, just in Singapore. RegTech is everywhere. Every single regulator, every single financial ecosystem across the world is now talking about it. What do we see in future in terms of future of the RegTech itself? We do see this, that going forward, there will be far more scrutiny on RegTechs as they come along to the market. VCs and investors, as well as the market and the banks and the regulators, would truly want to see what is the idea, is there a sound business model backing it or not. At the same time, RegTechs which have ability to operationalize and ability to scale will become very, very important. So scalability, operationalization, and flexibility will by far play a very big role as we move along in the future. But with that, I would now like to invite Sanjoy to come on and introduce himself, as well as share his views on the topic.
Thank you, Bhavin. Firstly, I'd like to thank the DFSA and the organizing committee for inviting me here today and to sit among a very distinguished panel. So my name is Sanjoy Phuk and I'm the Global Chief Operating Officer for Bank of Singapore. I'm based in Singapore, but we have offices in many locations, including a sizable presence in Dubai. And prior to the current situation, I was almost traveling to Dubai on a monthly basis. So I hope to have the opportunity to meet many of you in person in the near future. And at Bank of Singapore, among other things, I'm responsible for the bank's digital transformation. I think, Bhavin, as Munir alluded to in his opening remarks, the world has changed. And as we enter the next normal, I believe we will see further changes in both operating models and client engagement touchpoints. So the world of dynamic compliance becomes even more of an imperative. I believe we will face a more digitally enabled population and a more digitally demanding workforce, and that will have an effect on the RegTech roadmap. So as we plan the recovery and move into the next stages, my view is that RegTech will only accelerate across the financial services landscape. Now, the question you asked, Bhavin, on what are the trends? Well, I think the trends that are shaping banking and financial services in general will shape compliance, innovation, and RegTech. So here are my views on some of the trends that I'm seeing, both in Singapore but globally, in terms of the innovation roadmap. Regulators will want data faster. So banks need to deliver speedily, but also with accuracy. So reporting as a topic becomes top of agenda. I think there's an increasing, although there always has been, a focus on investment suitability, but specifically on pre-trade checks and the automation thereof. I think what we've seen as well, given the recent market volatility, is that banks, regulators, control functions, and clients we'll need to be able to show that we are communicating to clients in a timely fashion on portfolio changes or market events, especially during volatile times, and that we're not always dependent on the relationship manager for that communication. As always, regulators and ourselves want to move away from paper and manual processes. There's still too much paperwork flowing through organizations. Although, having said that, necessity breeds innovation and invention, and the work from home scenarios that we've all encountered over the past few weeks have forced us to go paperless in many instances. I think sample sizes with regard to surveillance activities need to be commensurate with the risk. We can't always increase headcount, So to increase sample sizes, we have to, we have to implement technological solutions for that. And very importantly, from a client perspective, simplified and personalized client journeys in a world of Netflix and Uber has become the norm. So RegTech has to play that role in the customer journey as well, right? We can't just view it from an internal perspective. We have to look from an external perspective as well, which is very much part of my role. Finally, I think I see much more collaboration between regulators and financial institutions to solve problems together rather than banks operating in silos. So across all these trends, RegTech plays a role above it. And I think what we'll move to is a predictive rather than a reactive capacity when it comes to the control environment. Right now we react, whether it's in the, in the second line or the third line or the first line. How do we move to be more predictive and proactive? And that is where I think RegTech can play a big role. Thank you, Bob.
I think that's brilliant, Sanjoy. And I think you really made it two very good points. Customer journey is extremely important because the demand for customer is changing. And we will see that with COVID, the behavior pattern will change, right? Consumer behavior is going to change. There will be more demand for contactless. And as we go in a contactless environment, how do we manage AML, KYC, suitability would become a very important question and probably a good challenge for RegTech to solve. At the same time, I think the predictive side is also brilliantly put. I guess that is where we should be heading towards. Prevention is always better than cure. But with that, I would like to invite Charles. Charles, you have been in RegTech world. You run a RegTech yourself. What do you think of some of these challenges? Please introduce yourself and share your views.
Great. It's great to be here, Bhavin. So my name's Charles Dellingpole, and I'm the founder and CEO of ComplyVantage. So I guess as a RegTech, we've raised $40 million. We're kind of 250 people now. We have clients in kind of 80 countries, and we're focused on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. So customer screening, transaction monitoring, KYC, AML, and I guess in terms of the broader RegTech journey. So this is now the third company that I've started, and so I started this company about 6 years ago now. So at that point, RegTech didn't exist at all. Similarly, when I started my second company, fintech didn't exist. But then suddenly people came up with this kind of sexy name of fintech. And then similarly, I guess out of fintech came RegTech, as in you had this kind of Cambrian explosion of thousands of different companies in lending, in insurance, in payments. And I think precisely the same thing happened in RegTech, as in, although it's called RegTech, it's obviously a very, very broad space, and lots of the companies have nothing in common beyond this kind of regulatory umbrella. So if you look at reporting or cybersecurity or GovTech, and so often companies that are normally in the same space have never heard of the other companies in that space because they're so very, very different. But as a kind of broad term, it kind of makes sense. So and I guess the kind of genesis, and also to the second question around what does the future hold in store with regards to post-COVID, I think the same kind of structural trends are carrying on, in that there's this kind of broader 10-year shifts of technology. So I guess 10 years ago, banks were very, very siloed in terms of you had lots of large on-premises software from the 1980s. And suddenly you have Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix that are kind of reinvented technology, and you have the cloud. So what you have is this huge amount of technology which suddenly you can apply to finance, to self-driving cars, to technology. So I guess what we've done is we now have 150 engineers, and I guess maybe 15% are kind of algorithm engineers. And what we're trying to do is use natural language processing and all kinds of machine learning to extract high-risk terrorist entities rather than doing that manually. And at least to me, it just seemed crazy that if we're trying to track 8 billion people and companies and see which ones are terrorists and which ones are money launderers, then there's no way you can do that with people. So in terms of our journey as a RegTech, and in terms of the broad journey of fintech, RegTech, is basically trying to use technology in new and innovative ways to create the future.
Thanks, Charles. I think it makes a lot of sense. And yes, data analytics has become important. Optimization is very important because otherwise we just are drowning in the data and information, right? And I call this more as the age of information overload. We have a lot of information, but we have very little which we can call valuable information, which enables us to make a right decision. But on that, Nigel, you advise a number of clients across the IFC and across the country as well. You also, I have seen, you play a role of a compliance as well with some of the financial institutions. How do you see RegTech playing in that space? And is RegTech meant for everyone? It's meant for few? Who should be looking at RegTech? And how do you advise your clients on them?
Thanks, Bhavin, and thanks to DFSA and DIFC for inviting me onto this distinguished panel. I'm Nigel Corsair. I'm the Managing Director of CCL, which is Global Governance, Risk and Compliance Consultancy Practice based in the UAE. So it's a good question. Why do financial institutions need some kind of RegTech solution? Well, I guess the growth has been a factor of three different things. Firstly, increasing regulatory obligations, regulatory expectations, regulatory demands have forced fintech firms to sort of financial institutions to develop their own RegTech solutions or to subscribe to such solutions. And we could talk about some of these solutions in a little while. Also, the growth of firms, as you transition from the sort of the SME type firm where you can probably do things on a more manual basis to a larger institution where manual processes are fraught with error and risk, you move towards the need for some kind of automated solution. And I suppose the last one would be areas where firms are looking to introduce operational efficiencies and improvements in the quality of controls. And types of solutions that we see out there, following on from what Charles has said, I guess the number one is in the area of sanctions and PEP screenings, where it doesn't make sense for firms to develop systems which have access to all the various databases out there. It's much better to use a provider who specializes in that and has, as Charles says, the algorithms which will help you to root out false positives and be focused on the real targets. We also see solutions in the areas of workflow, having CDD, AML, KYC type processes, which are more expert system-like, which guide relationship managers as to what documents they need to obtain for what type of situation. Transaction monitoring, both for AML purposes and for market abuse. Very difficult if you're an online broker to be able to do that on a manual kind of overview basis. Obviously, not for all firms. If you're a corporate finance firm with 5 transactions a year, you probably don't need an automated solution. But if you're an online broker with thousands, millions of transactions a year, then that will probably lend to itself to some kind of solution. What else have we got? Compliance administrative tools, particularly as you grow from a small, medium-sized entity to a large entity with numerous staff. It becomes very difficult to manage these things on a sort of Excel, Word type basis. You probably need some kind of logging tool which reminds you of regulatory reporting obligations, keeps log of your employee training records, attestations, and the like. An exciting area which we're seeing increasingly is digital identification and verification, as we try to move away from sort of viewing original documents. There must be solutions out there, particularly in this marketplace where everyone's not seeing people face to face. How do you get the original documents? So you have to move to some other solution. But with that said, I think the other thing to bear in mind is, how do you implement or introduce such systems? And it's very easy to say we need a solution. Let's look what's the market and then let's subscribe to it. But does it work for you? I think you do have to have a clear idea of what the deliverable is for the solution. What is the problem that it's trying to address? And will this proposed solution actually meet your requirements? Does it, for example, consider regional differences that may occur? And often you have global type systems which are out there, but when you try to implement them, particularly in a region such as the Middle East, where there is a lot less transparency on available data. For example, in the UK, US, you can get UBO data quite easily by plugging into Companies House and such things, whereas in the Middle East, it just doesn't exist. So it's that supplier who says, yes, we can give you all the UBO data. I always do tests. I actually say, well, tell me who the UBO of my entity is. And they always fail because they don't have access, even though it's publicly available, but they're not plugged into the right sources. So they don't plug into the DIFC, Registrar of Companies. And secondly, the next thing would be most solutions come at a cost. And I think you need to do, like in any kind of project, any kind of spend, you need to do a cost-benefit analysis. How much is this going to cost me, and what are the benefits that I'm going to derive from it? Particularly if you're bringing this in for operational purposes and efficiency purposes. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, perform due diligence. The know your supplier that Munir alluded to applies equally here. Now, you're going to rely on a person for a part of your processes as a financial institution, whether that's the PEP screening or the sanction screening or the transaction monitoring. And it's a material outsourcing. And the regulators have guidelines that you should follow for material outsourcing. You may even need regulatory approval, depending on what the nature is of this outsourcing. Go through that, do your due diligence. Now, what happens if the vendor that you're relying on to perform a key part of your control processes goes out of business? Where is the data being stored, and what does that mean in terms of data protection, client confidentiality, issues such as that? So don't assume that it's a simple matter of signing up for a subscription-based service. You do need to consider how that service is going to be utilized within your institution, and make sure you go through a proper analysis and review procedure prior to going down that route.
I think, Nigel, as always, super insightful. But you picked up on the right topic of due diligence, and if you are an institution going to go on a RegTech path, then which RegTech to rely on and what all needs to be kept in mind. I guess I want to continue on the same and go to Sanjoy again. Sanjoy, as a bank, right? You are a big financial institution. You look at number of RegTechs. It's a fair challenge, right? Number of RegTechs keep coming to you. Some ideas might be more brilliant than the others, but then how do you bring all of them within your environment and satisfy the need of your IT department, that any tech that is coming is secured, safe, and there is a reliability of service to it? And how do you handle that part from a RegTech perspective?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to the question. One is, how do you identify the different technologies that are out there? And then secondly, how do you go about the implementation process? So if I start with the first part of the challenge for me is keeping pace with all the different technologies that are out there, understanding who are the emerging players and what are the solutions. Because we have solutions coming out of Dubai, out of Europe, out of the US, out of Asia. How do we link them back to the bank, so that we really focus on the problem? And what we've tended to do in the past is take solutions, start them in Singapore, I take our case, and then we roll out globally. But with great innovation happening in the Middle East, can I start in Dubai and then move globally instead? So we need to be able to address that problem. That's why I think, forums such as these are critical for bringing different parts of the RegTech ecosystem together, so we can find areas to meet and to collaborate. I think that's critical. And to your point, I don't think it shouldn't be for technology's sake, but we need to be here to solve a problem at the end of the day, because there's lots of cool toys out there, but how do you go back and say, okay, what problem is it trying to solve, right? It's almost trying to find a home, force a home for a technology that doesn't exist. So if I look at our bank at the moment, and I was making a list last night of the different types of technologies that we're using to drive innovation. Now, I wouldn't class all of them as new or emerging, but to Nigel's point, moving from a proof of concept to scale is two very different things, because I can play in sandboxes, I can do this and that, but then if I've got to industrialize it across geographies, across regulators, that's two completely different things. So if I look at some of the tools we're looking at right now, we're looking at natural language processing as an example, to look at trends on complaints and look at chat channels. That's one area. Sentiment analysis. Biometric technology in terms of onboarding is going to be very, very important going forward for that journey. AI and machine learning for predictive modeling, pattern recognition, for transaction monitoring and fraud alerts. Data visualization tools, whether that's Power BI, Tableau, etc. How do I bring data to people in a way that is much easier for them to interpret, not just in the second and third line, but in the first line of defense as well, right? So it has to work across all three lines. Voice to text, that's a very, very interesting use case in our surveillance functions, right? They have to listen to call logs all day long. How do they data mine more accurately? Now, there's lots of technologies out there, but when you start like us in a global bank and you have multiple languages, multiple jurisdictions, different nuances, accents, everything else, then it becomes a much more difficult problem for us to solve. And finally, I think OCR is a very interesting technology as well, because we have lots of data that exists on old paper forms, old PDFs. Now, if we're going to data mine and visualize data and make predictive analysis, etc., we've got to draw that information out. Now, how do you get from 60, 70% OCR to 90, 95, 99% OCR? Now, that's again a challenge for a bank. There's a lot of solutions out there, so I speak to a lot of providers, and it works good on a sample set of 100 documents. But when you've got to move that to 10,000 documents or 100,000 documents, so many technologies and many use cases, but the challenge is focus and prioritization. Before you even get to the point, Bhavin, that you talked about, which is the onboarding of the vendor themselves, the due diligence and all of that, all those challenges that we face internally. But I think the first piece of the puzzle to solve is what's the business problem that we're trying to work for here.
Sanjay, spot on. And I say this at a lot of these conferences and my interaction with clients. Many a times we all have a brilliant solution, but we haven't figured out the problem yet. And we are still seeking which problem we are trying to solve, but we all seem to have this brilliant solution available, right? And that does happen. So, firstly, I think message to all audience, we are open to questions as a panel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send us through the question and we'll take it from there. Nigel, Sanjay spoke about some variety of new innovation that can come in this space. How do you see this in the region, right? Region has its own nuances in the Middle East. So where do you see, what are the specific areas where RegTechs can focus in the region as an immediate future of next 2-3 years, rather than 10, 15, 20 years down the line, right?
Yes, that's very true. And I think I mentioned that a lot of solutions which are out there globally may not work here. So that's the first obvious gap. How do you make those solutions work here? I mentioned the UBO data. Very easy in the UK, US, and many other countries where there's sort of a company's house registrar type thing, which is publicly available, digitized, and you can get access to that information. Now, if you could try and take that solution through to the UAE, let's not talk about the Middle East, let's talk about the UAE. How many registrars of companies are there in the UAE? There's a lot. Every single free zone has its own registrar of companies. Obviously, you have the municipalities in each of the 7 emirates. How do we get a system which enables firms to have access to that data, a lot of which is publicly available? It's not that it's shrouded in behind some wall, not all of it, but a lot of it. I mean, if I just look at the DFSA, that's publicly available information. I can go into it manually and find out who the UBOs of CCL are, but I can't. Why can't I do that with an automated solution? So there's a clear gap that needs to be addressed in the market. One thing that's come out of COVID is the use of, do we really need to have original documents? And this is almost a discussion with the regulator, and we need some regulatory support to understand that in this day and age, we've moved away from physical documents. We're not in a physical world, and especially now where we can't actually see an original passport because we can't actually meet the person to give it to us and then hold that document in our hand because we're wearing face masks and gloves. So we need to move to a different solution. And there are digital identification tools out there, some of which use biometric data, some of which are using the computerized numbers at the bottom of passports to check against check for authenticity. But this is where within the regulator, we have to remember the regulator isn't a single unified body of one voice. You have people who are very innovative, in the fintech and regtech space at the regulator, which is great, such as the people who put on this kind of conference. And then we have the supervision team who are a bit behind the curve when it comes to this, and they're used to what they're used to, which is they like to see that you've seen the passport or seen the proof of address or something in hard copy. So we need to get within the regulator. Copy. Yes. Yeah,
certified true copy, face to face.
Exactly. So we need to get the regulator comfortable, but it almost shouldn't be for us to make them comfortable. They need to understand that the world has moved forward, and we need to provide solutions, or the industry needs to provide solutions which it has done its due diligence on, and it has satisfied itself on a risk-based analysis that this is sufficient to meet the regulatory obligations.
Interesting. Sanjay, we have a question for you from the audience, and which is more to do with, given private banking is one of the biggest areas of growth, and that's a main area of focus in the region as well. The question is more around what are banks doing in terms of transaction reporting with regards to suitability, and what are the new trends in that area?
I think when we talk about suitability, my focus and our focus should be the pre-trade side, right? Because if you're dependent on the detective controls post-trade, right, you're catching things almost too late, and you're playing catch up with the client, and you're playing catch up with your control functions. But pre-trade suitability can be a poor client experience. Okay, where you have to call back the client, you have to verify information. The client is saying, I've given you this information before, you have my risk profiles, etc. So I think the challenge for organizations is how do we automate our pre-trade surveillance as much as possible? And then being able to provide those reports back to regulators or back to other stakeholders to say, yep, for this particular trade, it was sold to this many clients, and this was the risk profile, and all the due diligence was done, etc. Right now, I think across most financial institutions, that is quite manual. And that's because it comes back to also your order management systems. How well do our order management systems capture information? How well does the client profile feed back into the order management systems as well? So you have to look at this end to end. I think too often in the past, we've looked at things just from a trade perspective, but we have to go back to the onboarding part. When you onboard the client, you have to obtain the information in a correct way. When the client updates their personal circumstances or professional circumstances, how do you obtain that in a seamless manner? Feed it back to your order entry systems and execution systems to ensure the whole thing works end to end. I think the further challenge, Bhavin, on that is that different regulators have different expectations. So we as a bank have to cater, whether it's to DFSA, MAS, HKMA, FCA, etc., and make sure we're building something that is robust across all geographies and all regulators. And I think to the point that Munir brought up in his introductory remarks, we need to be able to keep track of all of that. Because every day or every week or every month, there's new legislature, there's new thoughts coming in from various stakeholders. So keeping track of that is equally important. And I think on the reporting side, again, we have to make sure that the data we capture is accurate and easily digestible for whether it's our regulators or our RMs and supervisory teams. I think that's critical. One interesting point, Nigel, you brought up on paperless, right? And I think we've started to see that. I've started to see that at least here, because let's say for W8 Ben forms, etc., where you had the old physical copy that you had to get the signature. Now with secure chat and secure comms channels, what I'm trying to do is say, since you have a secure channel which is on a registered mobile device, which is known to the client and the bank, is that an acceptable form of communication? Therefore, we don't need the paper-based form anymore. Or if we do require it, we get it later on as part of a periodic review. So I think, the theme here is that, COVID-19 has forced us to make some of these changes, and very quickly.
Yeah.
Agreed. Very interesting. We do have another very challenging and interesting question, and I would probably start with Charles. It's a question to all of us as panelists. There was a session yesterday where one of the moderators brought out the human part as a very important element when it comes to regulatory compliance, and to what extent can technology take over all these things. So what are our views as a panel, right, on that? And Charles, you run a RegTech, you are in the middle of technology, and you say technology is the best. So what happens to the human side of it, and how much human side is important when it comes to regulatory compliance and all the innovations we are seeing?
Yeah, so great question. For me, the kind of foundational thesis behind the whole building of the company was the notion of being able to emancipate people from boring, monotonous work, as in the kind of like there are certain tasks that absolutely should be automated, because no person should ever be subjected to the level of monotony and boredom and terrible tasks that they have to be confronted with. Then there's the kind of super sexy Jack Ryan, shadow agent, fighting terrorism type roles, right? So human labor is appropriate in some spheres, but inappropriate in others. And technology should be used to relieve the burden from people where possible, such that they can then be moved to the more interesting roles. And that's where things like, for instance, with natural language processing, right? So what we do is we ingest 10 million pages a day in Russian, Chinese, Arabic, and then we automatically extract all of the names and pronouns, and then we can see, okay, this person is a terrorist, this person is a money launderer. And like there's one in terms of what AI can do, there's two different things. So there's AI which can be used to say have the equivalent of 10,000 interns, right? As in to be able to automate the work that would have taken people say 1,000 people 10 hours a day for a year. But then there's the kind of next level of AI, which is basically being able to say what happens if we had an intern who worked for 100,000 hours and could then see the insights and patterns that only one person who had that level of training and insight could do. So I think in the short term, automate all the monotonous tasks, but then in the longer term, get to that kind of higher level of consciousness that's only possible with advanced technology.
Interesting. Nigel, you have a view on this? How do you see this?
Well, as Charles says, I think there's a real demand for RegTech solutions, particularly in the area of monitoring, particularly in the area of monitoring transactions, which are numerous and complex and the like, where it's difficult to see trends if you were just eyeballing from a report. You need to be able to do analysis in a much more, excuse me, much more sophisticated way. The problem that I find with most solutions, particularly on the transaction monitoring, is setting the parameters appropriately so that it reduces the number of false positives without weeding out all the true positives, and that's a skill in its own right, and it's not necessarily a compliance skill, but it's definitely a skill in setting those parameters appropriately. And I guess you need the human to actually work out what is a transaction, and maybe that's based on trial and error and experience. And so set it, see what you get, and then reset it, and keep doing this iterative process. I think that if you look at the, I always say compliance has three elements equally important: monitoring, advice, and education. I can see that in terms of the monitoring we just talked about, there's a need for that. I think in the education field, we're seeing a lot more by way of e-learning, particularly as you move into larger institutions where face-to-face is just not efficient or practical or relevant. If you want to communicate a simple message to a large number of people, e-learning seems to work. Plus, it really gives you the opportunity to build in exams to test absorption of that message. But where I find it very difficult to see where there will be RegTech solutions is in the area of advice and analysis, right, and giving solutions to issues, which I think will, for the current time, be largely at the human level. I think they could be improvements maybe in terms of like precedent databases, so that you know, if you're in a large firm where one part of the firm has had an issue, now how was that issue dealt with? So you give the consistent message, or challenge the original interpretation. But you don't want to be giving advice completely ignorant of the fact that that question has already been answered in a certain way before. So just using technology to make sure you have some kind of knowledge base, knowledge bank would be an area.
I think, Nigel, you are spot on. I exactly see the same way. There's compliance administration and there's compliance advisory. And most of the RegTech tools that we see, I believe, can bring a lot of efficiency in what we are doing. So if we are doing a mundane work, a KYC check, yes, that is something that can bring operational efficiency. It can potentially bring a lot of accuracy also in what we do by getting out to multiple data sources and giving us more real-time information. However, there is always this element of experience and judgment, and that is the part where probably humans have a biggest role to play in foreseeable future. And I do believe that is also where people will have to upgrade their capabilities and skill set. So people who are used to doing a simple KYC check and going on World Check and checking it, all of that is going to move on API. And hence there's an opportunity for these individuals to upscale themselves, upskill to the level where they can become a genuine, true compliance advisor and take decisions in difficult times where technology just becomes an enabler of information, but then lies a human judgment on the top of it. Yeah, I would perhaps see that. But on that note, I do have another interesting question from our audience. So when and how one day there would be a computerized MLRO which a company can hire or a bank can hire and essentially replace the human completely out of it? Is that a foreseeable future? Charles, you seem to be closest to that kind of a future. What do you say? Would you be able to replace human MLROs in some of our institutions sooner or later? Or do you even aspire to do that?
So I think the issue right now is that you haven't just got one MLRO, you've got like 10,000, 100,000 people working in these departments doing like lots and lots of this task, and still there's failure, right? As in still there's trillions of dollars being laundered. Like I was rewatching The Infiltrator last night. We had Robert Mazur speak, right? Like, you know, the amount of drugs being trafficked, the amount of humans being trafficked, the amount of crime, like, you know, what is so far from a digital MRLO, right? What is so far from eliminating all kinds of evil and crime, and there are so many people. Like, I think ultimately we will never eliminate the MRLO because there needs to be a single wrenchable neck if something goes wrong. You know, like the regulator will need to haul someone in and shout at them, right? So it'll be like a less attractive job, but I think still kind of like there's just so far to go and there's so much work to do before we even contemplate. Like hopefully like people's lives will be easier, but I think like in terms of digital MRLO, like that's hugely aspirational.
So Sanjoy, a quick question to you. How do you see data sharing and GDPR and privacy as some of the key factors coming in? And as we go more into cloud-based, regulatory solutions and technology, how would this play out? And where do you see the trends in this particular space as we move along?
I think maybe one point, Bob, and I think my MLRO, Charles, will be very happy to know he has a job for life, right, since he's not replaced. But I think, that humans don't adapt to change very easily. And one part we need to remember here is change can be scary. So when we talk about RegTech and digitization of jobs, we need to bring people together on that journey. And that's the responsibility, I think, of the RegTech community for financial institutions, governments, and regulators. So we have to be continually thinking about how do we communicate to our people that this type of change is going to be beneficial to them in the medium and the long term. Because you can talk about RPA and you can talk about AI, but if you don't communicate it in the right way, it can be a scary thing for someone working in a role as well. So I think that's an important topic that's across all organizations and stakeholders. To your point, Bhavin, I think one of the elements when we look at RegTech is around the data privacy and cloud-based risks that may come with different recommendations. Because from a client perspective, especially in I can speak to the private wealth space, privacy is critical. Right. So if we are looking at different solutions from providers, that's one of the first things we look at, and obviously that goes through the various layers within our organization for sign-off, which may sometimes frustrate organizations that which want to work with financial institutions, but I think it's an absolute imperative. And with regard to cloud specifically, I think the various stakeholders that are involved in cloud decisions are still learning themselves, right? Whether it's the banks, whether it's the companies, etc. Because again, data privacy and data collection are very hot and very sensitive topics. So I have a responsibility not only for our clients' information, but also for employee information to ensure and to communicate exactly how it is being used and how it might be used in the future. So it's a difficult conversation, but again, the benefits of cloud are clear, right? In terms of operational efficiency, in terms of cost, in terms of scalability. So it's a balancing act, that I have to work closely with our technology partners, with our risk offices, etc.
Great. So we are dot on time. So I'm going to take probably 30 seconds more. Firstly, to all the audience, fantastic questions. We have all your questions. Some we couldn't answer. We'll genuinely try to answer them individually or through some other form. Before I say goodbye to the panelists, we're going to do a quick round, and it will go in the order of Charles, Nigel, and then Sanjoy. I'll ask one question. You have to answer only in one word. The first word that comes to your mind as I speak. COVID. Charles, one word. COVID. Just one word. You don't have time for a sentence. Nigel.
Resilience.
Sanjoy.
Sadness.
Future of fintech.
Big data.
Charles. Nigel.
Exciting.
Sanjoy.
Huge.
AI, blockchain, money, machine learning. Charles.
Mixed bag.
Uneducated.
Sanjoy.
Use case.
Brilliant. Thank you all. Thanks for joining the panel. And Vandana, thanks a lot for organizing this. And thanks to the entire DFSA team.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That was a great discussion. I can only say one thing, that as a regulator, I do need someone to shout at when things go wrong. Before we move on to our next session, we would like to post a couple of questions to the audience. The first question is, are you using technology solutions for regulatory compliance? The second question is, how important is digital onboarding to your business? If I can kindly request you to answer those questions while I explain about our next session. Next, we have invited 4 RegTech solution providers to demonstrate their solutions, focusing on a mix of regulatory compliance areas, including transaction monitoring, whistleblowing, and compliance monitoring. These demonstrators are Contexa, Tremind, Alethea, and SAS. Each will have a total of 15 minutes to demonstrate their solution. You are welcome to submit questions to them. They will leave a few minutes at the end to answer as many questions as they can. Questions they don't get to answer during the 15 minutes, they will be able to respond to them through the question box functionality. Before we start with the demonstrators, we would like to make the following disclaimer, which will come up on the slide, and I will read it out aloud as well. Please be aware that the participation of a demonstrator in this event does not in any way constitute a recommendation or endorsement by the DFSA of that demonstrator, its products, or services. The DFSA is not responsible on any basis whatsoever for information presented by the demonstrators and has not reviewed or verified that information. Now I would like to invite Matthew Long, who is Head of AML Solutions, EMEA and APAC. Over to you, Joel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joel Ballin. I am the one of the co-founders and the CEO of Tremind Tech Limited. We are based in the FinTech hive of Dubai International Financial Center. We express our gratitude to the DFSA and DIFC for providing us with this opportunity. Our aim is to assist financial institutions to improvise and automate their processes through modern technology. With that in mind, we have developed a product called Compliance Activity Monitoring Portal. It is important that as an organization, we showcase all the good work we have done through an impeccable audit trail and documentation, and CAMP helps FI fulfill this need. The system is one-of-a-kind solution and has several distinct features, including KYC and adverse information screening, regulatory compliance management, complaints management, trade and transaction surveillance, automation of manual compliance processes through a workflow system between staff and compliance officers, staff conduct monitoring, a single view dashboard for all outstanding alerts, an incredible reports module, and an email notification system. Our value proposition is to provide features that are customized to the needs of the respective firms, a reliable system from a cybersecurity standpoint, user-friendly and convenient, competitive pricing, and cost-effective. The system is based on best practices covering the entire case management cycle, from recording and managing the case components to generating the output and providing analytics and historical data. It is designed to complement the organization's existing technology infrastructure. Adverse information screening is no longer an issue that can be ignored by financial institutions. Using adverse news screening with artificial intelligence can protect the organization from unconsciously facilitating financial crime. Regulators around the world have long recommended that adverse news screening be included part of the compliance process. This poses a challenge for FIs to handle the amount of information that could be identified during negative news screening. Most of the firms do not do periodic adverse information checks, except for sanctions, of course, because it's labor-intensive, manual work, which is ineffective and error-prone. And also, it's unlikely an analyst would be able to speak the dozens of languages required to properly understand different regions. Keyword searches alone does not provide the real picture and will throw a lot of false alerts far beyond the capability of any firm to handle. Adverse information screening using machine learning is the only way forward to fully and efficiently know the risk associated with your customers. CAMP is a good adverse information screening tool that is able to identify if a client is implicated with a crime just based on the description provided in the article. Each article is processed by an artificial intelligence tool called natural language processing. It understands the sentiment if an article is negative or positive, if it's related to law enforcement or politics or otherwise, through which we reduce false positives drastically. The system has a scoring model based on the confidence level of the article, which helps the organization review alerts on a risk-based approach. It supports multiple language screening like Dutch, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. At the moment, it does not support languages like Arabic, Hindi, or Urdu. It screens clients against information available on public domain, sanctions lists, and internal blacklists that will be maintained by our compliance. Understanding patterns are an efficient gateway to mine. The rule engine that operates these surveillance scenarios are designed intelligently to identify potential cases related to market manipulation, including insider trading, wash trades, front running by staff and clients, mis-selling, etc. CAMP primarily covers transaction monitoring scenarios that have been overlooked by the current transaction monitoring systems. The classic wire transfer monitoring is not a part of our system. Rather, we monitor securities transactions, movement of securities between unrelated parties, risk profile mismatches, investments in illiquid securities, etc. We also monitor high-risk funds transfers that originate from or sent to exchange houses, transactions between staff and clients that pose a potential conflict of interest, transactions that get rejected by correspondent banks for compliance reasons, which will assist both the relationship manager and compliance officers to conduct due diligence on the client from an AML perspective. The system also reviews staff telephone calls that are recorded by the organization from an AML perspective. Using artificial intelligence, the system converts calls to text, identifies calls based on keywords for potential breach of policy, and alerts the compliance officer should there be a match. In this scenario, we are mindful of the data protection requirements of various jurisdictions. Complaints management may be considered a key, even an essential variable within a service-based relationship. Identifying the origin of the problem as perceived by the customer is a major element of the complaints management process. So this requires access to a tool where staff are empowered to record any complaint from a customer. In CAMP, complaints management goes through various stages. First, the information is received and recorded into the system, and an acknowledgement is sent to the client immediately. The system reports the case to an expert, that is the staff in charge, or complaints management officer, or a compliance officer as appropriate. Second, the authenticity of the complaint can be examined, explained, and closed in the system with a clear audit trail and appropriate documentation. Finally, responses are provided to the complaining customer. I would say the system is the first step of a good complaints management process for financial institutions. As we all know, internal suspicious activity reports are an important indicator for the compliance culture of an organization. All staff are required by law to report to the MLRO should they have any suspicion of money laundering or financing of terrorism. Banks have been penalized by regulators for failure to identify and report suspicious activity to the FIU. This system empowers staff to report suspicion to the MLRO in a confidential manner and can interact with the compliance officer and vice versa through the system. Also, compliance can investigate and document the results and also if an external SAR is required to be filed with the FIU. The access to information is controlled differently for staff and compliance. Compliance monitoring workflow. The system has a KYC module to document all client information and also conduct periodic reviews based on the risk classification of clients. Ad hoc reviews can be initiated through the system should there be any material change to the client's risk profile or the profile including any negative information. All alerts pertaining to the respective clients are displayed in the respective KYCs. This enables both the first line and the second line of defense to conduct a comprehensive due diligence on the client. CAMP is a workflow system through which staff and compliance officers can interact with each other and handle any request within the system itself. All advice and approvals, which currently are handled via email or telephone calls, will be initiated, replied, and closed in the system. All staff who are insiders or facing a conflict of interest situation have an obligation to take approvals for any purchase or redemption of securities from their line managers and or our compliance officers through the system. The system also monitors if a staff is front running by matching these securities against transactions that were executed by the clients. All requests for approvals when giving or receiving a gift or entertaining clients or making political contributions can be managed through the system. It helps identify conflict of interest situations and records the actions undertaken by the organization. All regulatory communications, including circulars, enforcement notices, rulebook changes, consultation papers, and court orders, which require action or otherwise, are recorded through the system, through which we can identify the impact any regulatory notice would have on the internal policies of the organization. Internal and external regulatory breaches, when identified, are recorded, investigated, and corrective actions documented through the system, including filing of a regulatory notification if necessary. It also helps in maintaining an internal blacklist of local sanctions, SART clients, clients of unacceptable risks, rejected and declined businesses, clients investigated by the FID, etc. Staff will be able to search their clients and related parties against this list through the list screening module, which every staff of the organization will have access to. Training management can be done effectively through the system. It will initiate alerts for training and maintain records of attendance in line with the regulatory requirements. Minutes of client meetings can be recorded in the system. Minutes of governance meetings as well can be recorded in the system. And any outstanding action points can be recorded with target dates. Staff declarations are initiated and reconciled through the system. When an organization is initiating a declaration to staff, like whether he has read and understood a policy, or whether he has declared all the gifts, or whether he has disclosed all his personal transactions, those kind of declarations can be done through the system, and staff can acknowledge or reject or accept. And these records will be maintained in the system. In CAMP, data is stored in a very structured manner, hence information reports can be extracted from the portal on a variety of subjects, which can help the management make more accurate and data-driven decisions. I would like to show you all a short video. One second. Where you will get to see the features of
CAMP has 5 distinct features. List screening, periodic screening of Internet for negative press on clients and related parties. Reduce false positives using artificial intelligence through natural language processor, NLP. Sanctions list from the UN, OFAC, UKHMT, EU. Internal blacklist like suspicious clients, rejected clients, court orders, FID investigations, local sanctions, etc. Trade and transaction surveillance is one of the critical modules to combat criminal activities such as market manipulation like front-running, insider trading, churning, etc. Risk profile mismatch, otherwise called client suitability. Layering securities transaction. Third-party transfer of securities. Transactions between staff and clients, conflict of interest. Exchange house transactions. Transactions rejected by correspondent banks for compliance reasons. Staff conduct monitoring to recognize patterns and prevent any wrongdoings. Automated monitoring of recorded calls, configurable to recognize different languages. Link voice trades to transactions. monitor and record internal and regulatory breaches. Potential front-running and insider trading by staff. Reconciliation of personal account transactions. Regulatory compliance management allows the compliance team to record keep trainings, meeting minutes, and the regulatory notification. Finally, the automation of manual processes and the workflow between the first line and second line of defense. Choose CAMP, an automation that protects your organization and employees from regulatory repercussions. For more information, visit us at www.threeminds.com or just drop us an email at info@threeminds.com.
Hi, we'll go to the questions now. There are several questions. I will answer most of the questions privately to the people who asked for the questions. There is one question which says, currently, do we see any consolidation in terms of RegTech? One of the things, we are a startup, so one of the things what we are contemplating, and most of the other firms are contemplating, is share the synergies between the RegTech firms that are there. There are firms which showcase their product, which are excellent, and ideally, a firm like ours would like to partner with some of these firms to come up with a consolidated system where any firm would have one single compliance portal, right from KYC all the way to, say, for example, trade finance monitoring and suspicious activity reporting. So I think there'll be a lot more consolidation on the RegTech field. And thank you all, and I thank the DFSA and the DIFC for the time.
Thank you, Joel. That was very informative. I would like to announce to the audience that all our demonstrators, including Matt Long from Contexta and Joel, will be online for some time, and they will be able to respond to your questions individually. Next, I would like to invite Craig Roeth, who is CEO and co-founder of Alethea. Craig.
Hello, guys. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
We can see your screen, but Craig, if you can just switch on your camera. Great.
You got me?
You're not on camera right now. If you can just switch it on again.
You got me now?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Over to you.
And you can see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. My name is Craig, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alethea, a simple, secure, but most importantly, truly anonymous whistleblower application. We'd like to thank the DFSA for the opportunity to present to you guys. At Alethea, we instill confidence in employees to speak up, and we empower employees to put ethics into action. So whistleblowing is a hot topic of contemporary society, with people wanting to hold leaders to a certain level of transparency and responsibility. In today's world, and especially at the moment, hyper-transparency is the best thing you can do to attract the best employees and the best consumers. Ingraining strong ethical policies within organizations is not only limited to protecting company assets, but also promotes a healthy and safe working environment. Ethical behavior at the end of the day is good for business. Companies that operate at an ethical level instill trust amongst the employees and consumers, and at the end of the day get rewarded where it matters most, and that's profitability. Whistleblowers are essential safety valve in this ethical corporate culture. They provide a mechanism for healthy corporate governance. These employees are your best eyes and ears on the ground, but unfortunately, fear of retaliation. Sorry, let me just take it back. employees are your best eyes and ears on the ground, and most of them want to do the right thing. Unfortunately, fear of retaliation prohibits many of them from speaking up and doing the right thing. In fact, according to the ACFE, 50% of employees who witness misconduct don't report it out of fear of retaliation. The Alethea online dashboard and mobile app creates a safe communication channel between an organization and its employees, allowing them to safely report any unethical or unlawful conduct. The mobile application links to the dashboard by way of a unique organization code. We do not capture any personal details or trace any IP addresses, and all interactions are encrypted using SSL encryption, providing security and complete anonymity for the reporter. So communication is by way of anonymous two-way text-based communication, and it allows for the attachment of audio and video files. Whistleblower reports, let me move back a sec. So whistleblower reports appear immediately on the management dashboard, automatically notifying the appointed administrator. The administrator can monitor and react to any reports received and anonymously communicate with the reporter in real time to gather further information. All information is recorded, date and timestamp for future compliance, and ultimately archived for analysis and risk mitigation. So how do we differ from existing reporting channels? So we understand that there are many reporting channels and anonymous reporting lines, but unfortunately most companies still rely on outdated anonymous hotlines. So in a digital world, when we think about workforce demographics, GDPR compliance, cost implications, and the overall decline in telephone usage, this is no longer best practice. Secondly, with the global shift to app-based communication, Alethea is deliberately being designed to fall in line with the most popular messenger apps in the market. Think anonymous WhatsApp. Other reporting channels include intranet solutions, cumbersome online forms, and then personal interactions with Ombudsman and HR. Unfortunately, these offer little by way of follow-up feature, and most importantly, all present a real or perceived threat of compromising the identity of the reporter. I'd just like to leave you with a quote from Benjamin Franklin, where he says, "It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation, and only one bad one to lose it." Alethea helps prevent an issue becoming a crisis. I think you could look at Alethea as almost being a dash cam for your organization. I'd like to thank you for your time. It's short and brief, very simple application, and bring a very human element into reporting misconduct and unethical behavior on the ground. And I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Craig. Craig will be available for questions later on. I'm not sure if there are any questions right now for Craig. All right. So with that, we will thank you so much, Craig. With that, we will move on to our next presenter, Maher Ahmed, who's a Senior Business Solutions Manager with SAS. Maher, over to you. Maher, if you can just unmute yourself, please. Maher, apologies, but can you just check if you are unmuted?
Sorry, I have to put on this. Sorry, I'm switched now to, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Sorry. Yes, so just quickly, I would really like to welcome you all and thank you, DFSA, today for inviting us and organizing this webinar. So I'll be taking you through like a quick introduction about SAS. SAS is a US-based company. We've been around in business for the past 44 years, mainly known for our advanced analytics background and capabilities. The company has more than 15,000 employees. In fact, our regional office for South EMEA is based also in Dubai Internet City. We have more than 150 employees stationed in our Dubai office. Something to highlight here is like 25% of all annual revenue from SAS, which is, as of last year, it was like more than 3 billion USD. It goes back into research and development, and which is really helping us in this type of topics where we have continuously changing and dynamics in the area of fraud and financial crimes and compliance. So that's really where we try to really be on top of the game, understanding new trends and how we can really help our the industry and our customers in addressing these type of challenges. This is just a slide about our existing and market presence. As of today, we have top 18 of top 20 financial institutions globally that are using SAS or depending on SAS technology when it comes to fraud and financial crimes. Similarly, here in Middle East, we have more than 70 different clients, banks, insurance, financial institutions, leasing companies, and other type of fintech as well, who are using SAS, AML, and sanction screening solutions. There are globally, we have more than 300 different customers who are using SAS, AML, and compliance solutions. And in fact, recently we announced about the new investment of 1 billion investment in advanced analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and where this can really be deployed in addressing the issues around fraud and financial crimes. This is just a quick market analyst, like what the analyst is saying about SAS. So yes, we are the known name when it comes to AML, enterprise fraud, and as well as machine learning. And this is maybe a unique differentiator about SAS. So we are really maybe one of the unique technology vendors today available in the market who are scoring or recognized as leader when it comes to specific business solutions like compliance, AML, sanction, and fraud, as well as in advanced technology and addressing issues around data in general. So yes, I've seen this is happening, like it's a repetitive message from yesterday. There's an overlapping happening between all these different areas or challenges. Yesterday we were discussing about the AKYC and how we can really help optimizing or doing some sort of like automation and getting a better value from the data that we have internally or the data available externally. And today we will know more about like what we can do when it comes to transaction monitoring, terrorist financing, sanction screening, trade-based money laundering, tax, which cover FATCA, CRS, and all the rest, as well as anti-bribery, anti-corruption. That's all the different like domains or areas within the compliance area. So again, back to the SAS story, it's just a one unified platform. We have like a common technology layer, which will help us address all sort of like enablers when it comes to data, getting the data in the right quality, fixing issues, addressing issues around the data quality and enriching the data from internal or external sources, and finally passing this to the next layer, which in many cases is going to be like our advanced analytics and models and machine learning and AI, and where we can really start like looking into suspicious events. These could be like financial transaction, non-financial transactions, and then passing it to our investigation team with the right highlights and the right, let's say, scoring, telling them which one is like high priority or highly likelihood that there's going to be like an AML violation, or which one which has like a low score and there's something can wait once we're done with the high priority alerts. And as you can see on the business modules, these are, again, it's a modular, and we can start with one area at the beginning, and again can expand on the same like platform. So I can start like with my AML transaction monitoring at one point, and then expand that to cover my sanction requirement, my correspondent banking, trade finance, market abuse, all sorts of other use cases, and at some point it can also cover additional use cases when it comes to fraud, like internal fraud and application fraud and other type of fraud topologies. So the end-to-end methodology that we follow here in our solution approach, so it starts, as I said, from data, and data can be like anything. It can be structured data, it can be unstructured data, it can be in any language, it can be so we can really digest data in batch, in real time, in near real time, and we can like work with any sort of volume with data. In fact, one of the largest global banks are using our solution, and they process more than like 500 million transactions a day. And when it comes to like volume of data, it's never an issue. It's always about the right like hardware specs and the sizing and everything that we help you with. And once we're done with addressing issues around the data, we manage to connect to our source systems, and we take it to the next layer where we can have the system comes with a lot of built-in business rules. These are mainly driven by global best practices, the FATF 40+9 recommendations, our experience in deploying this type of solutions in the region here in Middle East, in UAE, in Saudi, in GCC, and other countries where we really understand the local regulations, and we can help our customers by guiding them what are the business rules and scenarios that need to be enabled or applied, as well as this can take to a level where we can deploy or take advantage of supervised or unsupervised models for machine learning and AI, and that will help us to the next layer where systems start like flagging all those customers and different transactions as suspicious, and then we take it to the case management and investigation process. As well, it has this feedback loop where this will keep updating our models, so we can really optimize and enhance the model, the detection rate, as well as the false positive reduction that we are always trying to achieve. So this is really where the feedback loop will play a role, and it will keep optimizing our models. These are like some global logos that we are working with for the past 15 years. We've been busy deploying SaaS AML and financial crime solutions across the globe. And in fact, as I said, in the region, we are well established when it comes to having like a local presence and local experience. These are like some selected logos. In fact, some of these customers have been using SaaS for the past 15 years or even more, and they're using it for the same financial crime, mainly AML and sanction screening and payment filtering as well. And in fact, you will see more recently we're working with fintech like in Saudi, BayanPay, Halala, and other fintech new like e-wallet and mobile operators as well in the region. I'll take you quickly now. We've covered this, the advanced analytics capabilities. So yes, in SaaS, this is really, it's been taking early in the process when it comes to understanding the different source systems we have. Do we have like a unique record for representing each customer, or do we have a duplicate, or do we have multiple sources with multiple copies of the truth and so on? That's really where we can take advantage of machine learning and advanced analytics, helping us in getting the entity resolution and deduplication of the customer files and having that unique identifier. And then next we move it to the next layer where we can now let the system do the segmentation for us using data-driven historical transaction of the customer, and based on that the system will tell whether this customer should be treated as, let's say, retail, mass, an expat, a minor, and different one has a different expectation or different behavior, transaction behavior profile sort of thing. And from there, now we can understand what sort of business rules or scenarios that need to be applied for this segment, and what would be normal transaction and what would be an abnormal transaction, and accordingly the system will help us in getting those alerts. And then the third stage where we do post-alert scoring, and this is more about the optimization and reduction of false positive or total reduction on the overall number of alerts that get raised. And model detection, this is a quite a bit advanced stage where in many cases we try to switch off certain business rule. Let's say I will get rid of all my let's say payment related scenarios. This could be like 5 or 6 different scenarios, and replace them with one model. Okay, and that's usually, it will take some time for the institution to get to that stage, understanding the behavior of the model and the scoring and how this can be really deployed in a production environment. These are like some case studies where we helped other customers in achieving whether it is like reducing false positive or total number of alerts, as well as in this example here where we replace 10 scenarios or 10 business rules with one single model, and even manage to achieve better results when it comes to the total number of alerts and the new SAR rates that can get generated from the new alerts that we are generating. So I'll be quickly taking you through the transaction monitoring. As I said, I mean, the system comes with a pre-built data model. We call it the SaaS financial crime data model. It has a pre-built scenarios. These are mainly driven from the global best practices and regulations, as well as an alert and case management interface, which we will see in a minute. And finally, it has a lot of management reports which are prepared for different personas. I have my MLRO, I have my individual investigator, I have my head of compliance and country or group compliance, and there where we really have all these different set of dashboards and reports prepared for the senior management as well. So this is really like the story here we have. This is going to be helping us a lot when it comes to time to market. So we understand what data that we need to outsource from your core systems, as well as what scenarios that can be applied for these type of products or these type of channels, as well as having like a well-defined process when it comes to case management and user and alert and triage management. And finally, we're going to help with the single view of a customer. So we'll be reading data from various sources, various products and transactions, and achieve that one view over the customer, having the overall exposure of this customer, how many total alerts are raised, what are the channels that this customer is using, how many connections or relationships we have with him over the last, let's say, 5 years, how many of these accounts are active, credit card, and many other information that we can get from the source systems. So from here, I'll just now move quickly to my demo. So basically, yes, these are the watch lists that we usually work with. We do support all the globally recognized watchlist providers, as well as the internal list available in any organization. So from here, and when it comes to like the matching capabilities, we are always not only depending on the name match or fuzzy name match. In fact, we use SaaS like advanced analytics, as I said, using like Arabic transliteration as well. So if you're dealing with non-Latin English, non-Latin or English names, the solution will help us to do real-time transliteration of certain names and do the matching for you, and it will show you the results whether there is a name match for a customer his name was captured in a different language than Latin or English. If I still have some time, I'll quickly take you through like less than 5 minutes demo. Would that be okay?
Yes, that should be fine, Maher.
Excellent.
About 4 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so basically here I just logged into the SaaS demo environment. So I'll just 1 second. It seems it got timed out. I can take any questions. Yeah, it's active. Sorry. Yeah, so basically I logged in as like an AML officer based on the membership, or sorry, the permission assigned to me by the management. I've got assigned to different strategies or queues. I've got my transaction monitoring queue. I've got my customer screening, customer risk scoring, message monitoring or payment filtering, and then I have my customer onboarding. So it depends on the permission and membership. Sorry. Okay, so there we can really Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can, Maher.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, so basically I was explaining about the, this is like more of a unified or centralized compliance disk. I've got assigned to the multiple strategies, and based on these strategies, I can see what are the total number of alerts assigned to me as an individual, or assigned to my group, or assigned to my team. And then from there, I can quickly tell how many of these alerts are highly suspicious events or risk, or how many are medium and low. And from there, I can now go and pick one of these alerts and start looking at the details, why the system is alerting me today for this customer, and what went wrong, what scenario is firing, and I can see the full details about the customer profile, and take it from there and do the like look at the historical events of the same customer. Was this the first time the system is alerting, or this has been reported in the past, and how many other hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can, Maher.
Good. Yeah, so here basically I'm just trying to see one of the queues that I have. I'll pick one of these sample alerts that I've managed to load into the system. And once I pick one of these alerts, I can see on the scoring history how many scenarios did fire for this customer. So it shows here what are the topologies or the business rules. So it says there's like payment made using high risk installment, structured withdrawal, okay, large cash deposits, okay, and I have also my alert activity where it shows the different transactions or the triggering transactions that got involved in these violations, okay. I've got
Hi,
also
Maher.
the,
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but I think there are some technical glitches because of which audience is not able to see the demo.
okay, can you, okay, can you see it now?
Yes, dealing with it. Can you give us 2 minutes?
Yes, sure. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead. And if we can just wrap it up, that will be great.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so basically I was just trying to show you the, I've got an alert, it's complaining about this customer has done something, some suspicious event. I've got the details based on what the system is complaining or what are the red flags. So it shows here what are the scenarios that got fired, what are different transactions that got involved, or the triggering transaction for this specific scenario or an alert. I can also see the full customer transactions for the past, let's say, 2 years. I can see also the scoring history. Was it always the case with this customer from the beginning, or it's more recently that we're getting high severity alerts for this customer? I can see the full audit log from the time this alert was raised, who did work on this alert, what action was taken, as well as finally I can see the network analysis of this alert. So we started from the Sheila Tisser here, okay, as a customer. There was an alert fired recently. There was also another alert, historical alert that was closed, which reported, let's say, a few months back. I can see the static profile of Sheila Tisser. There are some contact information, address. She has only one account with us. I can expand from here just to see, okay, what additional information the account can show to me. In many cases, it's going to be the transactions, who are the registered beneficiaries, what other events are linked to this account, and also based on all this data pointers, then now we can start looking at, okay, yes, this has started as just looking at one suspect, and now I can see there are many other entities are involved in this ring. And from here I can now start like digging out and finding out more details about the transactions and the different associations between these different nodes, who's the beneficiary of what type of transaction is it like on the receiving side, this is on the sending side, and through which correspondent banking this is being channeled, and the details of these transactions, what's the amount, the currency, the date and time, and many other details that the system can show to us. I hope this really and from here I can now take it through like create a new enhanced due diligence, okay, request, and this will go to my front office or our relation manager or the RM, and the RM will pick it up from there, and he will tell, okay, what are the required information that we can specify to him, and he will be able to help us providing those additional missing information like understanding the source of wealth for this customer, what is the public record search, and or anything else, and then this feedback can also now be sent now to the compliance desk again.
Thanks a lot for that, Maher. That was a very informative session. I would just like to remind the audience that Maher will be online in case there are any questions for him specifically.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
So that was our last demonstration for the day. Before we go on to the next session, I would like to announce the poll results which were conducted at the beginning of the demonstration. In response to the first question, are you using technology solutions for regulatory compliance? About 58% of respondents replied saying they are using tech solutions, and 26% responded saying they do not use any tech solutions for regulatory compliance. As for our second question, which area of regulatory compliance requires most effort for you? Not surprisingly, about 50% of you responded that new customer onboarding takes most effort from you, followed by AML screening at 32% and KYC renewal at 13%. Now I would like to introduce Peter Smith, who is the Managing Director of Policy, Strategy and Risk at the DFSA, to speak on some of the regulatory policy initiatives. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Vandana. Good morning, everybody. It's can you see me? Oh, you can see me now. Okay, right, good. Good morning, everyone. It's I'm glad to be able to take part in this RegTech live event. I'm going to cover 4 things in the next few minutes. Firstly, I'm going to talk about our overall approach to innovation. Secondly, I'm going to highlight some areas where we think we need to engage more with the community. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about some areas where we actually think our regime needs to change. And lastly, I'm going to talk about internal innovation, what we're actually doing within the DFSA with technology. So on the first of those, on our own overall approach to innovation, I'll get to the slide on the future of finance in a minute. But on our overall approach to innovation, you may have heard these messages already over the session yesterday and today. But I think as a regulator, we're very supportive of the use of technology to improve the way that financial services as an industry functions. We can see benefits in terms of better customer experience. We can see benefits in terms of swifter and more robust processes. We can see benefits in terms of better risk management. We can see benefits in terms of new and potentially, important word, potentially better products. Of course, all this innovation and deployment of technology is not without risk. You'd expect a regulator to say that, I think. Some of the things we see are old risks in new clothing, but there are genuinely some new risks which need to be addressed properly. And I think the event that we're part of now is important in terms of looking at solutions that can help the regulated community and the regulator get better at a whole wide range of activities. So for us as a regulator, it's important that we do play our part in building the ecosystem in the DIFC, in Dubai and in the UAE to support innovation properly. So that's our starting point. So just to cover a few areas where largely our existing regime already allows activities, but there are areas where we think we need to engage some more in order to help the market develop fully. And the first of those is digital banking, as you can see from the slide. The DFSA has already licensed many banks over the years and is happy to consider applications from digital banks. There are, of course, a number of issues in being digital only. Some of those issues, some of the solutions that have been discussed today and yesterday may help with, but there are a number of specific issues to being a digital only bank, and we would intend to highlight those issues in a forthcoming publication. There was a session yesterday afternoon on eKYC and digital onboarding, and Vanden has just mentioned that it's a key issue for many of you. I understand yesterday's session was informative and interesting. As a regulator, we are open to digital onboarding, and a number of our licensed firms are already using both digital onboarding and the eKYC solutions. And I think you've heard something about some of those. I think in the area of eKYC, in the area of digital onboarding, what matters to the DFSA is that clients are onboarded properly and that firms meet their obligations when it comes to anti-money laundering and countering terrorist financing issues. You know, the UAE has been through a process over the last couple of years with the Financial Action Task Force, which means that anti-money laundering issues and CTF issues are going to be high up the regulatory priority list for the foreseeable future. So what's important to us as regulators is that firms do this properly. The actual methods by which firms meet their obligations and the tools that they use to achieve that are very much at the choice of the firm. Whether they have partially digital solutions to onboarding or completely digital onboarding is a matter for the firm. The important factor, again, for us is that firms do meet their obligations. There are clearly many, many ways by which that can be done. Just as an aside on the subject of eKYC and digital onboarding, there's an interesting question about what happens if centralized eKYC solutions become commonplace as a utility style operation within the industry. would such a centralized eKYC solution itself need to be regulated? It is an interesting question that we may need to turn our minds to in due course. Another area that's clearly important for market development is digital custody. The debate about hot and cold storage, the debate about private keys and public keys as when it comes to digital assets is one that continues to rumble on, and we again will be seeing more in the near future on the relative responsibilities of people involved in the custody process, and we will set out what we consider to be good practice in this area. Lastly, on the areas where we think we need to engage more, we will be publishing some thinking on the use of APIs and on the issues that people need to consider when they're using APIs. So I'll move on to my next slide, which is the areas where we do think we do actually need some new rules. We will be consulting later this year on issues on the regulation of tokenization in all its many forms, which continues to evolve quite rapidly. Some of the issues again there are quite clear, some of the issues less clear. Secondly, we're going to be consulting over the summer on changes to our venture capital regime, which obviously in and of itself isn't necessarily innovative. Nonetheless, the innovation ecosystem needs a range of players if the ecosystem is to thrive, and providers of capital are clearly a very important part of that. And I'm sure a number of the companies who've presented solutions and so on would agree that you know, a thriving venture capital sector would be a considerable boost to the innovation ecosystem. Thirdly, the proliferation of trading venues that has accompanied tokenization does pose challenges for regulators, and we need to think about what we want to do in this area. There are all sorts of questions, from what are customers being told about instruments traded on these venues, to how market integrity is assured, if indeed it is assured. I'm sure we've all read many of the stories of various of the crypto exchanges that have been hacked. So some of the specific issues that arise there as well when it comes to trading venues, the intersection between new trading venues and new forms of custody poses new risks as well there that we need to consider as a regulator. Lastly, the both interesting and challenging area of artificial intelligence. Now, many people around the globe are considering the challenges and especially the ethical issues that can and will arise from the use of artificial intelligence. As an AI solution learns and develops, can the owners of that tool still explain how inputs and outputs are connected? How do you manage bias? How do you address the ethical challenges? Explainability of artificial intelligence tools and the outputs that they provide will be a real challenge in the years ahead for the industry, and I think more broadly, obviously, than in financial services. So that's what I was going to say on the rules areas where we will probably need to introduce new things into our regime. Just a few words, I think, on the DFSA's own innovation agenda. It won't surprise you that, like many organisations, we see significant potential benefits from the intelligent use of technology. Just to give you a couple of examples of things that we are looking at the moment, we're working on more automated processing of license applications for what we would regard as low-risk license applications. We're quite near the point where an application could be approved in theory without human intervention. Being cautious by nature as regulators, we're obviously not going to do that immediately, but would need to do a lot of further testing of the tools that we're using, so that we can be confident that there is a proper scrutiny through the tools we use, and that there is the right answer is produced. That's an area that is quite interesting for us. We're also testing the use of a chatbot, like many people, I guess, nowadays, to answer queries on our rule book. We hope that will make our rule book more accessible, and perhaps easier to navigate for people. We're also looking at a number of other tools, including the use of some NLP tools to help make our rule book a bit more accessible to some people. And we really have two aims in this. We aim to make ourselves more effective and more efficient as a regulator, but we also hope to make ourselves easier to do business with, so that the regulated community can deal with us in an easier manner. Just lastly, obviously, this webinar is about RegTech, and in most cases, RegTech firms, RegTech providers don't need to be regulated. So perhaps you wonder, well, why am I talking about rules and so on? Well, there are two answers to that. Firstly, the DFSA has a significant interest in RegTech because the solutions that you've all been talking about are ones that will be used by regulated firms, which means that we do need to know what is going on. But secondly, I think it's also helpful for us to set out our future agenda, so that you, as potential suppliers with an interest in this area, can see where the market is likely to develop and where it may evolve, and think about what that means for you. So I hope that's been an interesting run through of the DFSA's current position in terms of its regulatory regime. If there are any questions, I'm happy to deal with them, but if not, I'm happy to hand back to you, Vandana.
Thank you, Peter. I'm sure many of our audience were very keen to understand the DFSA's views on what is expected from regulatory perspective when it comes to RegTech solutions, and what are some of our key policy initiatives that we are planning to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us almost towards the end of the two-day event, and now I would like to invite Justin Baldacano, Managing Director in Supervision at the DFSA, for the closing remarks. Justin?
Thank you, Vandana. I'd like to firstly start by thanking everyone for joining us today. I'd like to reiterate what Brian, our Chief Executive of the DFSA, said yesterday, that we all have to make significant necessary changes to adapt to all these new technologies. The industry has had to do it to continue to provide and improve services, and ourselves as regulators have had to continue to meet our regulatory objective in an ever-changing environment that we're dealing with today. Innovation in financial services needs to develop in ways that we don't jeopardize the safety of our clients, which is extremely important to the DFSA. On top of that, the integrity of the market and the financial stability as well of the market itself. It is important that regulators and the industry engage in these open dialogues, such as this RegTech event. And it's important that everyone understands what the emerging technologies are doing, to understand each other's views, the regulatory considerations, and also the risks on how best to address them as well, which we've discussed over the last 2 days. We fully support and encourage the use of technology and the delivery of financial services, as well as maintain regulatory compliance. But we don't encourage any support of innovation that comes at the expense of our clients, the protection of those clients, the market integrity, and also financial stability, which is extremely important to the DFSA. While our regulatory requirements may be more flexible, especially in the current crisis that we're dealing with at the moment, we're also trying to ensure that we're adaptive to support the new technology that we've been discussing over the last 2 days. Our regulatory objectives themselves are not flexible, but we'll continue to safeguard our clients through those objectives and also continue to safeguard the market itself. I just want to touch on a few key points that I myself took away, I guess, over the last 2 days. The main thing was around the challenges that we do face with some of the innovation technology, and that some of the technology is so innovative that we have to strike the right balance between the innovation itself and also the regulatory requirements. It was great to hear directly from some incredible innovative firms such as Infido, Finergo, Asacor, and Norblock as well. And these firms are probably key in regards to meeting those challenges. We'll encourage to support such initiatives in future as well. Today's session has been great insight, especially as we started off the morning from Munir, who gave great insight into things like dynamic compliance, keeping on top of the significant rate of change that we're sort of dealing with at the moment. And also the new focus. So rather than just focusing on the client itself, focusing on things like knowing your supplier, which I think is extremely important in the current circumstances, given that so many institutions are outsourcing to new innovative firms and everything else. The panel discussion in regards to navigating the RegTech landscape, for me, there was a number of aspects that I took away from that session. I guess the panel spoke heavily on RegTechs playing a huge role in regards to predictive aspects of what we're looking to do, providing better control as well for firms that are leveraging off RegTech. And more importantly, that cost-based analysis that we heard around increasing efficiency with regulators globally would be very welcome in regards to efficiencies of ensuring that we've got more focus on analysing the information that is being driven by RegTechs themselves. Also, very interesting comment around potentially replacing MROs with digital MROs. I think that is, agree with the panel, that is probably far away, but it is something that is potentially being discussed. Big thank you also to the demonstrations that we saw today from Quantexia, 3Minds, Alethea, and SAS as well. So they were great demonstrations and were able to give us appropriate insight into what those firms are actually doing at the moment. I would again like to thank the firms and the presenters who took part in the RegTech event over the last 2 days. And I look forward to the future of RegTech as well. A big thank you to the DFSA and the DFSA teams that put the event together. We had over 600 people registered for the event. So from our perspective, it's been a great success. I would again like to thank everyone for their attendance, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. So thank you, everyone, and we'll now close the RegTech event. So thanks again, everyone.